What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the Vicktory Life Legacy Spotlight. Today, I have a phenomenal guest, someone I am a huge fan of. You probably see me tweet about him, talk about him on Facebook and Twitter. I've been on his show, 757 Sports Talks on Saturdays. We have the voice of the ODU women's basketball play-by-play, Rivals, Virginia Preps consultant, analyst, sports talk guru, one of the best high school sports minds in the game, and also somebody I admire and just love listening to, Matthew Hatfield. How you doing, boss?
Dwight, it's a real pleasure. I enjoy a lot of the things that you do as well. It's a great time here. We're into the month of February, getting ready for March Madness, and staying mighty busy. This is a real treat and a privilege to do this with you.
Oh man, no, this is a privilege for me, man. And I could give you accolades and acknowledgments all day, and we will throughout this spotlight, man. I've had some great guests on, man. You know, people, whether they're cancer survivors, some of the best coaches in Virginia, some great college football coaches, former players. You also fit that mold with the guys I've interviewed, like the GOAT, I call him, David Teal. I feel like, you know, when I posted that you were going to be on this episode, I got tons of feedback. I saw GOAT, my guy Woo, who covers the City of Hampton sports, man, with those guys that I played at. He called you the GOAT. He said, Matt can tell you about a backup point guard in Giles County.
Well, that's very kind of Wube. You mentioned David Teal. I mean, to me, he's the GOAT when it comes to sports writing in our state. He's been sports writer of the year, like 85 times now. He's getting it every year. And we've enjoyed having him on our program and chatting with him. And just he's kind of set the bar for a lot of the young aspiring journalists and writers and reporters out there. And it's been funny when I started this, I guess, journey, you could say. And I know we'll get into all my background and how I got into this a little bit. I never envisioned doing high school sports. I started as a teenager doing my own website at MatthewHatfield.com, which still exists. I don't update it as frequently because all the hats I wear with radio and writing and so forth. Even I've done some TV at times. And I wanted to do the college and pro scene. And I wanted to be that person on ESPN doing Sports Center, doing this. I get asked all the time, what do you want to do? And what's been your goal in life? I want to do those things. As I've kind of gotten older and I'm still learning, as we all are day by day, that's not really been what I've been chasing or seeking or wanting. And if you told me 18 years ago I'd still be doing this, I wouldn't have believed it because I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I was a deer in headlights, and I still probably am to an extent, but now I know too much stuff that I can't report or write about, as you well know, having been a former player and been in the college scene and spoken with so many of these pros.
No, Matt, and that's why I said you're a great guest to have on, man, because so many people respect you, admire you. In today's sports world, where it's evolved into hot takes and sources, misguided information. Everybody's yelling and screaming. I think you and Ed and just your group and your integrity gives it a lot of excitement and fun, but yet you can still be classy. You can still be critical, but also not lose yourself in what you're reporting and also what you're covering, man. And it takes a lot of hard work, what you do, to be that versatile, man. So with that being said, before we talk about some of the great games and teams you covered, you know, the players, women's and men's basketball, football, all the different things you'll know about. We want to know right now, let's talk about where you're from and where'd you grow up and how'd you get into sports? Because I think, you know, sometimes we need to hear how you know so much and where you came from. So when did it all start?
Yeah, born and raised here in Virginia Beach. Well, I might have been born in a hospital in Norfolk, but I pretty much been born and lived in Virginia Beach all my whole life. I had to go check my birth certificate. It might say Norfolk as opposed to Virginia Beach, but nonetheless, So my mom and dad split when I was about 6 years old. Still have good relations with both of them. But when I was a baby, I had two people that are very near and dear to my life. I have to give their names out because I haven't done this yet. But their names are Lewis and Diane Henninger. They brought me in, took care of me when I was like 4 or 5 months old, and they're kind of like my adopted second parents, grandparents, whatever you want to call them. And I've helped them now. A lot of people don't know this about me in regards to additional stuff I do with sports. You might go through sometimes occasionally my Twitter or Instagram and seen my little niece that I put up there, who's 5 and so forth. But I've helped them for now 20 plus years raising kids as well, because they did that with me. So that's been a big near and dear part to me and my family, because I've had opportunities as I've gone on in this to move to other states and do other things. But they mean a lot to me and the folks here in the community around Hampton Roads. But so I went to Kempsville Middle School, got straight A's there, went to Kempsville High School, And if I have any regrets, Dwight, it would be that I did not pursue a playing career. I wouldn't have been a pro. I wouldn't have been a D1 dude, although I like to believe I was a D1 shooter, because if you left me in the corner, and you can ask some dudes out there, and they might watch this later. You can ask Terrell Whitehead, former Norfolk State great NFL player. You can ask Chris Haran, this LC Bird assistant. I was deadly on that corner jump shot back in my day at Kingsville, but I didn't pursue it after my freshman year. And that's the one regrets. I probably would have been at most a Division III level dude, maybe played like at Virginia Wesleyan or something. And my dad, actually, interestingly enough, he went to James Madison. Allegedly, technically was on the roster. We have no, I guess, evidence of stats being logged, but that was back in the day. You might remember it when Mike Fratello, the czar, was an assistant.
Yes. Yeah. Good nugget.
You can tell stories about Mike Fratello all day, and his let's say hot temper, but he loves Fratello. So there's nothing bad about Fratello there. But anyways, so I kind of grew up around basketball. I watched as a kid. My initial favorite player was Dominique Wilkins, and then I became a big. And it's funny, I just listened to a podcast with Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley with Dominique coming back from Miami on our ODU trip to FIU, and I love that. But my favorite guys were Karl Malone and John Stockton. I mean, and I got to interview John Stockton at the PIT one year, which was a thrill for me. Despite all the stuff he's in the news for right now, which we won't delve into, but Malone's been my favorite guy of all time. I just admired his durability and consistency, and my heart was broken when they lost to the Chicago Bulls in 98. I knew Chicago was better in 97. I'll go to my grave arguing that they were better in 98. Utah, I won't exhaust and annoy your audience with my reasons why and how they got robbed, and it wasn't the push-off. It was a Howard Isley three that should have counted and a Ron Harper jumper that shouldn't have counted. And that cost us a Game 7 at home against a Bulls team with Pippen having a bad back. But nonetheless, lived and breathed with those teams. And I tell people I would cut off my pinky toe for them to win that championship. That was my favorite team of all time. I've had some other favorite teams. Got some family, like my uncle lives in New York. Got some people that lived out in Arizona that were family friends. So I kind of adopted the Diamondbacks and the Cardinals as my teams. Diamondbacks won in 2001. It's the only pro sports team of mine that ever won a championship. And my Cardinals with Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald were this close against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But after around that time of 03-04, and as I was finishing up my schooling, I got a buzz from the folks at Virginia Preps. And you know some of them pretty well, Dwight. Zirkle Blakey, who was the initial editor. Yeah. Rod Johnson, who was the co-editor, publisher. He's now coaching football, by the way, as an assistant at Grassfield. He was with Bill D, the late, great Bill D at Oscar Smith for a couple of years. Was at Lakeland with Joe Jones. And they reached out to me about, because I used to post on the message boards, would you want to cover high school sports? Because at that time I had my own website, MatthewHatfield.com. And Dwight, I didn't know a thing about, believe it or not, I didn't know a thing about high school basketball. I had gone to high school football games. Yeah, I had gone to high school football games as a kid, because those folks I brought up, the Henningers, their son was in the Kempsville band. And in the mid-'90s, the Kempsville band was actually number 2 in the country. Their band director was a guy named Bill Pease, who went on to the University of Virginia. So I would go to Friday night football games.
Hold on, Matt. You said Kempsville's was?
Kempsville
in the 90s?
Mid-90s. You know what? Band director was Bill Pease.
My Norcom people watching this may email you or text you, because you were back then. Norcom and Phoebus felt they were the best bands in the 757 as well. But
they went to a competition in the Meadowlands up there, Giants Jet Stadium, and they finished runner-up in like a national competition. So I don't know like who did the rankings. It wasn't like, a Prep Hoops or a USA Today. But anyhow, I'm sure those bands were great too. But anyways, I would go to Friday football games, and it was funny, Dwight, because the band playing was a bigger deal almost than the football games. And it's weird now because Kempsville's had an up and down history in football, which I'm sure we could even touch on during this or another podcast interview segment at some other point. But they just snapped the state's longest losing streak a couple years ago, and Darryl Cherry had them in the playoffs this close to a region championship this year. But so I went to those games, and how I got involved with radio and how this all intertwines, as I tell this long story and try to condense it for you, is I wanted to be on the radio, and I would listen to the Tony Mercurio show. And you remember Mercurio.
Shout out to Tony Mercurio. Yes.
Yep. He's still doing it on another station. I'll give him a plug here. Freedom 1110. And I occasionally go on as a guest for him. And he's been a great mentor to me. And Tony and I have had ups and downs over the years. Tony's a guy, as you probably well know, you either love him or hate him. There's no in between almost with the Blast Man. But I'm so forever grateful and thankful to Dwight, because if people that really know Tony at his core, he gave me my start in radio. So I would go to his, and he tells this story a lot to people. I would go to his road show carrying just notebooks and magazines, pro and college. I'd do little printouts and type ups for, writings for him. And I know he said, who is this crazy kid? What is his deal? I was so, ambitious trying to get in the door like a lot of young kids were. And so I ended up phoning in around 2002 to the high school football scoreboard show, which is hosted by Richie Somerville to this day. It's always was a big deal then. It still is now. Social media has changed a little bit as far as how you get your updates, but you'd go coming back from a Friday night game to get the scores and stuff. And I would phone into Richie some chemical updates and occasional other games. That was around 2002. And that was kind of how I got known by some people around here and then Virginia Preps. They saw that. They saw my website. 2004 comes. They say, do you want to cover Eastern Region basketball? And Dwight, I didn't know anything about Eastern Region basketball. And this is like the week before the season starts. So I literally went and got a Street and Smith's magazine. I saw that Woodside was nationally ranked with Calvin Baker and Stephon Welsh. I saw we had big ticket Vernon Macklin from Norcom. I saw that I knew we had 3 pretty decorated coaches in the area as far as on the south side that were, and I had some either connection with or knew a little bit about, and Jack Baker, Bill Cochran at Salem, and my co-host now at Nansemond River, Ed Young. And then I got to build relationships with each of those guys, and then other coaches I got to meet and learn some. John Richardson at Woodside was great. Dennis Katufis, shout out to him. The late great Ben Moore was fantastic. I could tell stories all day about Ben and how near and dear he was to my heart.
Both great coaches.
Oh my gosh, Lonnie Blow, who's still coaching now at Virginia State. Shout out to him. Granby High. So I learned as I go. And John Richardson and me always joke now when we talk about just how green I was when I started. I would take this little digital camera to get headshots. We do stories then, and I started that beat. And as a matter of fact, my first game I ever covered was 2004. It was right after a playoff football game with Percy Harvard in Lancetown. And I got to meet the AD at Churchill now, Mike Whittington, who I developed a good relationship and friendship with. He coached at Lake Taylor with Hank Sawyer, won a couple state championships there. He's a former player at Hopewell and Norfolk State, and he was doing the stats. So I got to learn a little bit about how he did the stats, and that helped our company grow a little bit as far as having that type of data and info for our reports. And I covered a Maury Lake Taylor game, and that was the first time I got to really meet Jack Baker. I thought that guy was off his rocker. I thought he was nuts. He's screaming at hollering at everybody. I'm like, this guy's won 6. This guy's crazy. And of course, he's like 3rd or 4th all time in wins. So from there, it just kind of took off, and that's sort of my condensed version of my story. I've done some TV stuff with Cox 11 Sports Report. Got to do some games with the former Hokies voice, John Laser. We did some things with the Hampton Road Sports Network, now defunct. And I loved my time there. And I got to give a pop to George Krieger. He's the former co-founder of Fox Sports NFL football. And he did some stuff with HBO. And we recently had him on our show, remembering the late, great John Madden. He taught me a lot about the television side of things. And, here we are. What's that? 18 years later, still doing it.
Yeah, you're doing a great job, man. And you name some great people, man. Shout out to Coach Katufis, man, and those guys, man. And that was a great time. The Peninsula District basketball, and even on the south side. Just I remember going across the water, those battles on them coming over to our side in basketball. I mean, good Lord, you took me back for a second. Also, shout out to Somerville. It's crazy you mentioned him because I grew up in the 757. Everyone knows that, but I moved to Northern Virginia after I got cut by the Ravens in 2000. And, at the time, Northern Virginia has improved their coverage dramatically. But for a long time, it really was just high school sports had that great coverage in Tidewater. And then Richmond didn't really have anything. There was no Recruit 75. There was none of that stuff in Northern Virginia. So on Friday nights, I'm trying to find a way to hear Somerville do the breakdown and have people call in on the scores and all of that. I grew up on that, man. And Tony Mercurio, man. It was crazy, man. All those great games. Matt, I do want to talk to you about, you talk about how you earn your stripes. You got into sports media and you've done so much, everything from TV to radio. I want to talk about the challenges, though, like the behind the scenes stuff real quick, because there's so many people now that have blogs and podcasts, and I've talked to a few people that have started podcasts. They're like, wow, this is really hard. I didn't realize I had to do all this work and different things like that. You have been able to stay afloat where stuff gets defunct or falls off, whatever. You have become the go-to guy people check for. If you are looking at the state of sports right now, and this is not so much a political question, I just want your insight. When you look at all the misinformation, the stuff
Yeah.
going on here, people that don't know how to hold on to a source, so they put stuff out there. Do you feel like you have to be controversial to get more attention? You like the Skip Baylesses out there, and
Yeah.
you have Barstool Sports and all these different things. I'm not knocking them, but it seems to be so much
Sure.
stuff out there. It's gotten saturated. Can you speak on that?
It's a great question, Dwight, and I appreciate you asking that, because one of the things I say, and we bring up Tony, because one of the things that made Tony very, very popular was he would be a guy that would loved and embraced controversy. And I think that can be a plus in how you do things. And now we see it all the time with Skip and Stephen A. and those shows. And one of the shows I loved, in addition to Tony, and two mentors to me besides him, the late, great Terry Sasiski, former voice of VCU, Petersburg Athletics. I could spend hours upon what he meant to me and how it kind of shook me to my core. And I didn't get to know him as long as other people did, like the Robert Fishes that worked with him, but I was kind of his statistist guy for the last state tournament he did, when Norcom, by the way, beat that undefeated Petersburg team. And he taught me so much about work ethic and passion and enthusiasm, just that jovial way he did things. But and Mike and the Mad Dog. I used to listen to Mike and the Mad Dog all the time, debate sports. And someone was like my brother. Shout out to him, Brentley Henninger. We always, as kids, would have that type of debate and argue, like Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser with PTI, which I still love. And that's how we did that. Our folks used to say all the time, you guys should do a show like that. You should. And that's what sports now is. It pretty much is those debate shows. And we would argue about, no, the Magic are better than the Bulls. No, the Yankees. We did it all the time. But I don't think you have to be confrontational, Dwight. I think the word is you have to be conversational. You have to have a conversation. It can be have some controversy, but I don't think it's necessary. And if you force it, your audience is going to sniff it out and realize you're not genuine, you're not authentic. You have to be real. One of the things that really, I can't say this enough, and I'll put it out there. Delisha Milton-Jones, who's our women's basketball coach at ODU, one of the biggest compliments she paid me was she was like, real recognizes real. And you know that. Real recognizes real. The audience, the fans will know it. So if you go out there trying to seek and gain and acquire followers and retweets and likes, that's not the way you go about this business. The only reason I really use Twitter is to get updates and info out to the people. I wouldn't use it probably if it wasn't for that. That's the main reason I use it, for my job, for my keeping up with the news, keeping up with the Joneses, if you will. I wouldn't even use I'm still trying to figure out Instagram. I haven't figured out TikTok and Snapchat. Good luck with that. And Facebook, it's funny. I had this conversation with Ed all the time, who's very big on Facebook. Ed hasn't gotten a Twitter. Thank God. If he did, we'd all be in trouble. If he had an Instagram, it would be off the rails. But the older generation, and even my folks now are in their ages, they're starting to almost figure out Facebook. They love the Facebook. The kids used to love the Twitter. Now the kids love the Instagram. And kind of the in-betweeners are on the Twitter, which is how you get a lot of your updates, your scores, your news, your info. So it's funny how social media has changed how we do our jobs, because even in our business, one of the things that I remember Rod and Zirkle saying is, and you know this because you've done writing too, you've been in this business, is we're looking for subscribers. We're looking for those people, like the newspapers, looking for readers. We're not looking for retweets. And it took me even a while as a younger guy figuring it out, like, you want to get that out there, but you want them to come to your business. And I still think the social media elements are trying to, or I should say social media platforms are trying to figure out how do they monetize what they do to make their machines even greater and bigger and better.
You're right about the retweets, and you're right about Twitter. I've learned over the years to master it, but it is a dangerous tool. I love the updates. I love seeing what you're reporting, David, Andy Bitter, it's Mike Barber. I love that stuff because I'm an OG, and I love journalism. I feel like, though, and this is my opinion, not even Vicktory Life's, Dwight Vick's opinion, that I just feel like I appreciate what you guys do, guys, like I mentioned, David and everybody, because I feel like Nas said hip hop was dead, but I feel like journalism is still alive and well, but the integrity piece has lost its way because of social media, because of being the first to report it, because I need followers, and I just feel like that's being lost. I want to talk about, though, because again, we're going to dive into you covering sports even more because you have a great perspective. I know we talked off air as we were prepping for this interview about the time I played, in the Peninsula District, the golden era, from the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was really spectacular. But I look at the Tidewater region in general, and this is just my perspective, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. I remember growing up and playing, and you had even before me the Eric Hunters, the Aaron Sparrows, and then it was a generational. Then you had, Aaron Brooks and Ronald Curry and all those different guys and Michael Vick and everybody. So every year, stands were full and everybody was talking about. I remember Wavy TV 10. Shout out to Bruce Radar. On Friday nights, when I was in high school, as I was graduating, he would go around the helicopters. They would report all the games, and you had Tony Morrison at Indian River and Dre Bly and all those guys at Western Branch. The talent is still there, but do you think, as you mentioned earlier, with social media, now you have a sellout crowd for a big game, but other than that, you look on certain stadiums, a lot of them across the region, the attendance is down. It seems like, if it's a big game, yes, but in football specifically, we'll just start with that. It seems like the talent is still there in that region, but the interest is dipped a little bit when it comes to not the media coverage, but just the was it fanfare, the sports, intrigue. What do you think?
I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. I wouldn't point to just one single thing as the reason why it has gotten to that. I certainly think if you look around, it feels like, as you know, this when I first started around that 2002, 2004 era, the Hampton Phoebus game was the game of the year in the state every year. 8,000 plus the lines. Good luck getting there if you left at 5 o'clock. You're not getting in. You're not getting a seat. You're going to be waiting. And those were some memorable battles even before the Taj Boyd, Tyrod Taylor era, which you were a part of before that. And Lansdowne had that run there with Chris Beatty and Percy Harbin and Damon McDaniel and that crew that made it to 3 consecutive state finals, winning one there. And Harbin had just the unbelievable game. But I'd say now, outside of like Oscar Smith in the 757, it doesn't feel like there is just that. And I'll give you a few reasons why I think it is. And we were trying to get some of this off the ground with television. I wish radio, and I love what we do as far as our coverage that we can provide with the scoreboard show that Richie and them do and our Saturday morning show, but we don't have a game of the week on radio. There's not a game of the week on TV every week. We've done some of that with some streaming. The folks at Sportsplex have been fortunate enough to call some games thanks to Chuck Thornton, Nick Senti, and that crew. Darnell Moore, former coach at Bayside, and Woodrow Wilson. He coached Aaron Sparrow. He coached those guys at Bayside like E.J. Manuel and Demetrius Nicholson and Quinn Blanding, Henry Coley, all those folks, Anthony Cooper, Saquon Smith, Mizell. Oh, and Darnell is fantastic. I mean, I've been so blessed to work with coaches like Darnell and Ed Young. I mean, just go to the list of the vets, you know them, that are authentic. Yeah. The Hank Sawyers at Lake Taylor and so forth. But anyways, I think it's a combination. Outside of Oscar Smith, there's not really that big fan base. Oscar Smith's an event now. It's like a college game. Those folks come out there. They're boosters. They're supporters. They're alumni. They've got a terrific principal who's passionate about sports, and Paul Joseph and Ray Collins and that crew. They work hard behind the scenes, and Chris Scott has carried on that tradition that Rich Morgan blazed initially, and then Bill D, the late great Bill D, and Scott Johnson had there. I think it's a mixture of, we've had the COVID situation, so fans have been hesitant to come out for that. I think now you have your social media things. We don't have a lot of that game of the week atmosphere. You know this, and you go to Richmond, guys like Gary Hess and Gary Criswell do a tremendous job with that game of the week up there on radio. Northern Virginia's had game day with Andy Hayes and his crew. Southwest Virginia, they've got their games. There's almost a radio game of the week or TV game of the week in pockets of the area. And the peninsula, for lack of a better way of putting this, they've not adapted in some respects of doing a lot of these 7-on-7 leagues that some of the Southside schools have done. You see like Maury and Oscar Smith go on the road. There's a 7-on-7 league in Virginia Beach. You wish they'd had a little bit more of that. There's been almost a little bit of a break and a divide. And then the realignments come. You had some schools that had a limited year or didn't play a year in the spring with the COVID. You had some of that go on. And I just think it's a mixture of different things. Transfers going on it feels like at a higher rate in Tidewater, though it's probably the same statewide. So you've seen some kids that have left to go to private schools outside the area.
That is a big issue, man.
I think it's all these things. It's, it is the way it's all these things. They combine. It's not just one thing. And you kind of, you take a deep dive at it. And I think that's kind of contributed to where there feels like, and we had a stretch there, until Oscar Smith won here back to back, and Maury won one in 2019. There was a stretch there where we had like 2-3 years where we didn't have a team from Hampton Roads win a state championship. Yeah. And there's been a lot of, here's the other thing. It's probably the biggest reason, because Darnell Moore and I talk about this. There's been a lot of coaching turnover. You had Morgan leave. You had Beatty leave. You had Bill D pass away. You had this guy leave, that guy leave. You look at the 49 schools that encompass the old Eastern region, the Beach, Eastern, Southeastern Peninsula, even throwing the 10 Bay River schools. How many of those guys, Dwight, when I started in 04, 05, are still coaching? Well, Mike Smith was probably the only one. He just retired.
Great point. And all of that I'm aware of, but you putting it out there and bringing it all together makes so much sense because my family, my mother, father, my sister lives down there. I have a nephew who's a really good quarterback, great athlete. He's going to go to Bethel. He's in eighth grade next this coming fall, and then he'll be in 2 years he'll be a freshman. And
Okay.
he comes up to Northern Virginia. Derek Fisher, shout out to my nephew, and we talk
Okay.
about
Put that
my
name on
time
my
in
list
high.
now. Go ahead.
Derek Fisher, he's good. He's good. I'm going. I'm not. You know,
Got a
I
good
got.
name like that. 3-point
Yeah,
ace for the Lakers. Yeah.
yeah. And he says, he says, Uncle D, you know, like tell me about the times because I tell him about, Aaron Sparrow and Eric Hunter and Ronald Curry and Iverson, aka Bubba Chuck, and so many guys like that. And then how he sees me, we watch those videos or those games, and he's like, man, it's packed. And I talk about how Churchland basketball was the
Oh,
mecca. You
oh
got to
man.
Churchland late and you were sitting, you were standing because you were waiting for somebody to move so you can sneak. I mean, Maury and Kickertan and all those teams down there, Booker T. It was
Oh,
crazy. And it's
wars.
still, the talent is there. And again, you can also throw in the fact that it went from triple A, double A to single A to class 5, class 6, class 4, class 3, which I still can't figure out.
That's
We
a
have
big problem still. Very big problem.
I am on my son, I'm sure he doesn't mind me sharing him. He's like, Dad, if we win Friday night, we may play Battlefield again for a fifth time. And I was like, yeah, that's crazy. Now, and I was like, well, keep in mind last year, the state championship for class 6, division 6 was Centerville versus Potomac.
Yeah.
So it's he doesn't understand when I give him the historical perspective how it used to be different, right?
Yeah. And unbeaten Potomac had to play at Centerville. Unbeaten Green Run played its first road game of the year in the state championship at Stonebridge, which all of a sudden had like 200 people come out of the library if they won the game coming from 18 down, which we're still stunned that happened. A, and then B, that they had those people come up from like out of the floor, which they were happy and they deserved that moment. But you're right. Listen, we're coming back from Florida, and our coaches are asking me, hey, so how's this thing work? Like, people don't get it. The media doesn't fully comprehend it. The fans definitely don't get it. Even the coaches and players, when coaches and players in their own brackets are asking guys like me or whoever, it doesn't have to be me, how this works, that's a problem for the VHSL. And I'm not trying to be critical of the VHSL in this regard, but we all collectively, which includes the VHSL, the administrators, we all have to do a better job with this. And I do wish in a lot of respects it would go back to 3 divisions. It's not going to happen. We're wasting time and breath. 4 would be a more ideal because, as you well know, Dwight, Northern Virginia is booming so much greater than others. But you lose some of that. Hampton Phoebus is and Hampton Bethel, such a special rivalry. Nansemond River, Kings Fork, and Suffolk, such a special rivalry. Those Booker T. Granby, Booker T. Maury, fill in the Norfolk Portsmouth School, throw in Norcom, who had a rough year, but they've had great success under Leon Goolsby, 6 state titles. Those games mean so much. The fact that they can't play each other again in the playoffs, whether it be basketball or football, doesn't make any sense. The fact that we've got a team that just suffered its 13th consecutive losing season in basketball make the state tournament because they won 2 games in a weak region doesn't make sense. The fact that a team lost by 27 to a team that just had its 20-game winning streak snapped by its Peninsula District 4, we're talking about Kickertan, beat a team by 27 who's going to states in another region. They lose to Menchville for the first time. They played 3 good games, and they're done. Doesn't make sense. The way they have aligned some of these teams, I understand it's about enrollment, it doesn't make sense. And people have just, in some respects, gotten turned off by it, unfortunately, which is in so many ways sad and unfair to the kids and the players and those that are putting in the hard work for us to try to expose them and give them the coverage that they need.
No, it is everything you said. I agree with, and it's just interesting how, no one knows how it works. Because even when I asked my son's Coach Sherman Rivers, I'm like, hey, Sherman, who y'all got? He was like, yeah, well, hopefully, we got to figure out. We're waiting to see. And it's just almost like trying to understand trigonometry if you're not good at it.
But them and Potomac should have been a region championship game. Let's be honest. You were at that game. I watched that game we were at practice. That was such a tremendous game. And that felt like a game of the year game. And we get it in the regional semis, not the regional finals.
Nope.
And I've been a big believer that there can be, if we can reseed in other sports, in other leagues, why can't we reseed there? If we have the 2 best teams in a specific region or area, whether it's Northern Virginia, Tidewater, Richmond, I don't care where you're from. That's my thing. I do feel like there's some people in positions of power, not going to name names, that feel that we have to have everybody represented from each region. I don't care where you're from. I want the two best. I'm not discriminating here. I don't care if you're tall, short, white, black, skinny, fat. I want the two best at the end of the day. We want the best of the best in the championship round. We don't want a team that got through because they had an easier draw. And I feel like they could reseed, put the teams in the same regions on different sides of the bracket. Makes more sense.
You know what? I talked to, because I know a lot of coaches in this business, and when I was walking in with my wife and my family for that game, I spoke to some of the Potomac coaches. I dapped them up, gave them a hug, and I said, this is like the regional championship game. Because I just want to say this, man. Shout out to Potomac. I have so much respect for that program. I actually saw Sherman play against Ronald Curry and Muffin Curry and those guys. You know, Johnny's story. When I was at Tech, I'm about 4 years older than Sherman. It was so crazy how thing comes full circle. Because I'm watching him play. They lost in states to Ronald. Ronald and Muffin and those guys were good. Potomac was good. And I saw Sherman play the following year. They beat Hampton in the semifinals. And I remember seeing him. I said, you know, that Potomac program is really good. And since then, they've been very, very good. And I remember that game, and it was packed. It was intense. I was like, this felt like a championship game. And to have that, you know, be the game to go to states is crazy because you mentioned the Minchfield situation. It's just and the fact that no one really understands it is crazy. Hopefully the VHSL takes a look at that and takes the feedback appropriately, because you're right about people wanting it to be fair and even, because I still have a problem with seeing, especially in football. I'm like, what? 3-9? How are you in the playoffs? 3-9? But anyway,
the biggest problem. Here's real quick. Let's finish up on that, Dwight. The biggest problem on this, and you can talk to any basketball, football coach. You can throw out there the Dwight Robinsons at Lansdowne, the Troy Mans at LC Bird, Ed at Nansemond River, Eric Brown at Hampton, Keith Honore at Potomac. The football coaches, whether it be the Hank Sawyers, the Chris Scotts, the Doreen McCains, the Lauren Johnsons, the Mickey Thompsons. I'm willing to bet you every one of them's going to tell you, give us a voice. Let us have some say in these meetings. All the coaches say we get told what's going to happen because administrators make decisions. And my thing is, listen, some of those people are overworked, overloaded with stuff. We have often, and this has been my biggest bottom line statement, we have, and often cases, non-sports people making sports decisions, and that has to change. We have to make this a more collaborative effort for the betterment of our kids.
I agree. Thank you for saying that. And you're right. And that's what I've been told on and off the air by those guys, because I was like, what happened? They're like, I wasn't even in the meeting. They don't want us to be a part of it. I'm
100%.
like, what?
100%. They have no say, very little to next to no input. And often, and this is not every administrator. I'm not trying to destroy them or rip them apart here. You have some administrators, because I've been in, this is just like with TV, Dwight. You know this. Sometimes when you're doing a TV show and you have different producers or directors, they'll be like, let's just get to lunch. You got some of them that are like that. They just want to get it over with. They're not trying to evaluate it with the proper time because they have so much on their plate. Yeah,
no doubt, man. So let's talk about, let's touch on the talent and the coaches. I want to, and this is going to be a tough question for you, because I talked about what I have experienced as a player, and I get chills. I get nostalgic. Just take me back.
Goosebumps, right?
I just remember, because again, I tell people all the time. I told this to my son and his teammates. They're always in my house the other day. I said, listen, I have played against Clemson, Miami. I've been on TV. I've done broadcasting. I was a free agent with the Ravens the year they won the Super Bowl. I got cut before they went into the season, but I was in the locker room with Saragusa, Ray Lewis, Cornell Brown.
You got stories then.
Yeah. So my thing is, but with all that being said, if I could go back, every year when I was in high school, my freshman year, I was on varsity as a backup lineman. We lost to Garfield. We led 12-0 in halftime. We lost 13-12. First ever state championship game at Darling Stadium. My sophomore year, we had a great team. First time we lost a district in years to Bethel, Iverson. We go on the road. We win. We beat Granby. We lose the first Colonial in the regional championship. Junior year, we're loaded. Myron Newsom, talented team. I'm the best I've ever been. My junior year, we're number one in the state, 9-0, ranked in the nation by USA Today. Bethel is 7-2. It's got to beat us to get into the state to the playoffs, because they lost to Phoebus and Denby. They beat us 31-10. Iverson goes crazy. Kickoff returns, interceptions. They go on to win state in football and basketball. And I played basketball in high school too. So he beat me, his team, Tony Rutland, in basketball as well. And after we beat them twice, he went and beat us in the district tournament and in the district, whatever, the playoffs. And then my senior year, we are loaded again, and Norcom is we drop down to Division 5, and we lose to David Turner when Manor and those Craddock schools closed. They all went to Norcom, and they were loaded, and we lose to Norcom, and they went on to win state. So with that being said, I tell my son and all these young kids playing now, all the success I've had, I would love to go back and get a ring. I would love to go get a state championship, right? You got something? What are you gonna say, Matt?
Well, it's funny you said it because at one of our meetings of the day with the OD women, I'm doing their radio broadcast. Delisha Milton-Jones, former WNBA All-Star champion, shout out to her. She just got the call to the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, gets inducted officially in June in Knoxville. She teared up, Dwight, and talked about, got really emotional about, she won a couple with the Los Angeles Sparks, but it's the one that before that, it could have been a three-peat, how close it was and just what it, those burn every pro athlete or former college athlete, high school athlete I encounter, they always talk about like the ones they didn't get, and you're bringing up you missed, and the ones you get, it's always those. It's like, oh, we should have done it, and it's so fascinating to me because it's you just realize that's where you see just that emotion and passion and all that comes out.
I mean, you're 100% right. I miss those days, and that's why I love listening to you and Ed and your show when I can. I even sometimes up here put it on my when I know that you're gonna have a great guest on. I got time to listen. I plug it up in my car. Talk about the Friday night lights. I mean, you can go into baseball, basketball. Just talk about the talent you've covered, coaches included, and players. That's why I said it's a tough question. And just some of your favorite moments. Again, because I know we don't have 2, 3, 4, 5 hours, but as I mentioned, Potomac and Patriot and Granby and all those teams, basketball and football, I am a grown man and I still love it now when I go walk in the gym or in the field or go to a track meet. I love seeing the new guys. I remember when Bucky Hodges was coming out and I was like, man, that guy's an animal. And I'm seeing other guys play. I love seeing the journey, and I love high school sports and college sports the most. So just talk about your times, your memories. You mentioned Percy Harvin and though just some of the great coaches, great teams you covered.
Yeah, Percy's probably the best that I've seen live. I didn't obviously see Ronald Curry live. I've seen footage of him, and it feels like nobody compares to that guy. But if you're going to find somebody that can maybe compare to him, Percy would be the closest thing to maybe an equivalent if you can find one. He's the best I've seen live in doing this now almost 20 years. Just his and believe it or not, we didn't have the greatest of relationships with Percy when we first started covering. Some of that I'll take. Yeah, well, some of that was probably me being a naive new reporter, and there was some misinformation or a miscommunication, I guess we could say, about he claimed that that he never said he committed to Florida State when we kind of have it on record that he did, but that's the thing right there. That's another story. I still loved his game, and I think he was spectacular, and he motivated, and he certainly inspired so many youngsters to want to go do what he did. So shout out and congrats to him on all that he's achieved and accomplished. And he was one of the few guys, Dwight, where I remember being on the field. I think it was either at Norfolk State or somewhere where he played, and he just whizzed right by me. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the fastest human being or creature on the earth. Now, that being said, there might be one that's faster or more marveling in terms of just raw athletic talent in two guys from our area, and Grant Holloway, who just finished up short of a gold medal in the Tokyo Olympics from Grassfield High in Chesapeake, and he is just a freak of nature. And Justin Hunter from Ocean Lakes High School, who went on to play in the NFL, Tennessee Titans. I think he had a stint with the Steelers as well, played at the University of Tennessee. He was a three-sport dynamo as far as football, basketball, track. He still had some amazing numbers on the basketball court, too, to go with his track and football accolades. And Harvin was a multi-sport standout. Holloway, football, track as well. Those three leap to mind as just different cats, as they say, in the 757. As far as games and moments, there's so many of them. I just did a quick little headline of about 7 or 8 of them I'll just throw to you. And a couple of them have been recent. The one recently that comes to mind is the football game at ODU in the Class 5 state final with Stonebridge and Maury. That was just an unbelievable finish. And how about Jacob Thomas, a young man who's going to JMU for football. He didn't get a lot of the big attention. You can say this now. If he goes on to be an All-American at that level, He wins almost 4 rings in a span of a year. His basketball team came up just short of another one, but he won 1 in hoops, won 2 in football last year. He caught the game-winning pass against Lauren Johnson Springers in overtime to make SportsCenter. And he makes SportsCenter again by throwing it, rolling to his left the other way, right to Zeke Wimbush at the last play of the game to beat a Maury team that I'm quite certain will be back in that big game sooner than later under Doreen McCain, who's done just a fabulous job there. But he's like Tyler Scanlon up there at Westfield. It was a multi-sport standout. Some of these guys are just winners. Blake Francis, his teammate. We know his pops pretty well, Carl Francis, NFLPA.
Yeah.
There's just so many guys that are winners. And I think about that in the basketball floor too. DeMonte Buckingham comes to mind from Henrico. Maybe the best game I've ever seen, Dwight, was that playoff game with Henrico and LC Bird.
Yes.
Double
So hold on.
Yeah.
Before you finish, it's so crazy because didn't they go on to play Potomac?
Henrico went on to play. That might have been Potomac that year. Let me think here.
Yeah. I think
So-
Sherman and them were at that game because it's just crazy. But regardless, the only reason I remember that game, I want you to speak on that because I was up here in Northern Virginia. I was trying to get down there. I couldn't get off work early, and I followed you online. And I remember your tweets and your updates, and it was crazy because everyone there said that game was crazy. And I got to find footage of that. But go ahead. Yeah.
We actually have it. We put it up on our VA Preps video vault.
Okay.
I got the film from, I forgot if I got it from Troy or Vance, but I said we were doing it during the pandemic. Like, we want to put some of these old games out. So I'll send it to you now. What's funny is part of it, like, I forgot the interrelation or overtime got cut off because whoever was filming it was so crazy in there at Hermitage. But that game was fantastic. I know Henrico beat Norview to win one of those championships, and they beat Potomac Potomac beat Henrico to win one of those. So actually, take that back. Henrico beat John Marshall to win their first under Vance, and then they beat Norview to win the other one. And actually, they beat Norview 3 times that year because they beat Norview in the Virginia Preps Classic at Virginia Wesleyan, down from double figures. They beat them again in the region championship at Kellum, then they won the state final over them at VCU. But there's so many basketball games. You talk about Churchland. It brings back memories of getting set up there, which was always a pain. It was one of those things where you hated it, but you loved it. You hated having to go there, fight all that nonsense to get there and everything to get in the building, and can you get a laptop cord and get plugged in and deal with all that nonsense. But then when the games were over, you're like, oh my gosh, that was just so riveting and exhausting. And the late great Terry Sasiski, a Booker T Petersburg game was so wild, where Booker T, they were about to be eliminated. They came back, won the game, forced an overtime, and the fans jumped onto the media table and knocked Sasiski off the air. It was so, it's funny now looking back. It wasn't funny at the time because Sasiski was ready to want to choke somebody, but it was like, that's how crazy it was in there. Those Booker T games, when they played Nansman that year, that was a heck of a game. I bring up Nansman because I had to bring up Ed Young. I got the privilege to go ride down with them to the Beach Ball Classic in 2007. Prestigious event. In fact, it was a double duty for me because Kendall Marshall and O'Connell was playing there. And I got to interview, I forget if it was Kendall or his dad. And of course, O'Connell's had so many great teams and players over the years. And he went on to play at UNC, as we know, NBA as well. And Nansman played Duncanville out of Texas, which was number 1 or number 2 in the country, won by USA Today, won in Sporting News. And they were coming off a loss to Oak Hill that had snapped their streak of 56 wins in a row. And Nansman was getting ready to get blown out that game. Right before the half, Nick Wright had like a jam. Nick Wright had played at Old Dominion. They cut it closer, and I'm sitting there going, we might have something here. And I remember sitting there with Dave Tellup, who now works in the front office of the NBA Spurs, used to work for Scout.com, and long time, high school hoops evaluator and one of the best to do it. And right at the end of the game, Andre Jones hit a jumper. He went on to play at Winthrop and is still playing overseas professionally, by the way. Think about that. The kid graduated in 08, and he's still playing pro ball overseas. Wow. Unreal. He hit a jumper to force overtime. They get in the first overtime. They're about to put it away, up 4 or 5 points. Jones throws an alley-oop lob to Wright, who missed it. Duncanville comes back, forces second overtime. They hit a couple threes. It was either Sean Williams or Roger Franklin, and they win it in 2 overtimes. But that was a heck of a game. And we've had moments where teams from here have played nationally ranked opponents. Norcom beat Finley Prep from Nevada, who was top 5 in the country. And that Dorian Finney-Smith Norcom team gave us a lot of memories, back-to-back titles. He's now in the NBA with the Dallas Mavericks. There was always the argument who's better between him and James Michael McAdoo, who played in the NBA and played at UNC. And Finney-Smith, his game against Petersburg, the year Petersburg was undefeated. Petersburg has been so close. Talk about so close to championships. They're probably the best team that hasn't won those championships ever in any state, because they could easily have 5 or 6 of these suckers. And in this new realignment, they got to be saying, gosh, we win 7 in a row in this new realignment. But
I know.
They've been so close. On the football front, I mean, there's just so many games that leap to mind. That region championship here locally with Bayside Oscar Smith, that was like 42-40. Jalen Holmes, who plays in the NFL now from Lake Taylor, he had a one-handed catch the last play of the game against Granby. It's still up on Sports Report if you go look it up on our YouTube there. That was one of the wildest finishes to a game I've ever seen, just like the one we had this past year. There's so many of them. You go down the list of the Westfields and the Highland Springs and the Oscar Smiths. I mean, we could spend hours upon hours. The Phoebus games, the year when Phoebus had its streak of wins, certainly they were dominant for some years with Xavier Deeby and that crew, and then Taj Boyd and that crew under the late Bill D, and then Stan Sexton carried on. They had some games where you said, how did they win those games? The ones against Lake Taylor that haunted the Titans for a while. We could spend hours upon hours of those games.
Mm-hmm. The Lake Taylor and all the guys you named, Jalen Holmes, I've known them. Jalen, I remember him being recruited. I did a football camp back then, and him, Deshaun Hand, Tim Settle. It was some of the best D line. That class was special. And I remember seeing Jalen Holmes. I used to joke with him and Josh Sweat. I was like, you guys look like power forwards for VCU or something. They were so long and athletic, and they were a beast. I mean, it's just crazy when I hear those names. I mean, I remember you talk about, shout out to my guy, Troy Mans, one of my great friends, my brother from Virginia Tech, a great coach at Bird. I remember before he got his first state title, I would text him because he was close for a while. And he's been on my podcast. He talked about what he went through when he took that job and how he had to overcome some stuff. It's crazy. I know you and Ed talk about this on your show. The journey to getting a championship, the life lessons you learn as an athlete and as a coach from the shortcomings or mistakes or something you could have done differently, and you finally get it. I am a fan of it. I don't have a favorite NFL or NBA team, so I look at it and I just watch. People say, man, you watch the games and you're so quiet. I say, because I'm taking in a moment looking at what these coaches and players do, because a decision here or there can create a lifetime of joy and pain. It just depends, right?
Well, and to that point, it's something I think Rod educated me when we were starting out with Virginia Preps in kind of that mid to late 2000s and before 2010 era, was like the players come and go, but the coaches are kind of the ones that you build the long lasting relationships, because they're there. And you mentioned Troy Mans. I remember when he was at Hanover before he got to LC Bird, and you could see he was knocking on that door against Henrico. He finally got over the hump to win a championship. Hank Sawyer, same deal in football, Lake Taylor, knocking on that door. Finally got over the hump to win a championship. Even though Mickey Thompson had won already at Stonebridge, he lost so many to Tidewater teams. And now he's won back-to-back, and he's the king of the hill again. And he was a Hall of Fame coach before he lost those games.
Always a great coach. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm up here in Northern Virginia, and I'm going to tell you something. Stonebridge, they lost to Tyrod Taylor one year. They were driving to win the game at Todd Stadium. Tyrod was playing safety, came up, hit that guy, the ball popped up. Yeah. It was so many things that happened, but I'm glad you mentioned that, because he was a great coach before, and he's a great coach now. And you can't listen. Last year, you go and beat Highland Springs, and I was at that game. Highland Springs, that game was great. Then you go and you beat Maury. Okay, they earned that championship last year.
And Keith Henry did the same thing at Potomac. He had to beat Maury at ODU one year he was undefeated, lost to Wakefield in a regional championship, runner up. Didn't get maybe the best of officiating, still won the game, won the championship the next round. But there's so many coaches, and you probably find the tweet. I tweeted out one year when Doug Craig at WT Woodson lost to that Henrico team that shot lights out, but Vance Harmon. I tweeted out, and remember he lost to Colonial Forge, which won back-to-back. Jason John's team led by Marco Haskins and Winston Burgess. I tweeted out, he's going to win one soon, because the two coaches I said that are due for a state championship were Doug Craig at Woodson and Dwight Robinson at Lansdowne. They both got him later. Kenny Harris, my guy at Green Run, he couldn't beat Eric Brown for forever at Hampton. He'd lose those playoff games. He finally broke through, and what a story they've been. I bring up games in moments. Dwight, the stories and the memories, this as a former player, it's those times even after games that you remember with your teammates and stuff. And some of the memories that we don't see in the games, just the people you meet. And the late, great Ashley James, the young man who died tragically a couple years back, he hit that buzzer beater at Scope against Ed's Nance River team, one of the most wildest finishes I've seen in a game from half court. And Kenny and Ed are good friends, in fact. And they win the region championship the next year. AJ comes to see them, that double overtime game against Norview. The kid dies tragically. And just, I've never been moved to tears like that, Dwight. But when I got a phone call from Coach Harris the morning of his passing, I remember, having to put the news out and put down, and I sat down and I kind of wept for a bit. And it was just like, but it's genuine. It's relationships you build with people. And they went on to win a co-state championship because of the COVID, just a weird way. But there's so many, the stories you can tell as us in the reporting business of the players and the coaches and the journeys that these programs go on. It's just, they're almost limitless. And that's what to me is so fascinating, the storytelling that we do. And you get it at all levels, not just the high school level, but the collegiate and professional ranks too. And then when they're done playing, there's stories to tell.
I want to talk about Virginia real quick, Matt. I want to talk about the state, especially for the talent on the high school level, because I've been on your podcast, your show, a few times talking about Virginia Tech, and even I talk about UVA, how these coaches they have now, I think, going to win the state back and get both programs back on track. However, I don't want to focus on college. I want to talk about the state, because one thing I've seen is I went to Virginia Tech for college and played football there, and I met people from all over the state. And I remember at that time, you felt like in football and basketball, if you got out of the 7-5-7, you're going to win this championship, because Southwest Virginia was behind. Northern Virginia always had good teams, but the level of competition wasn't the same. Richmond always were really good athletes, but coaching might not have been great. And then on top of it, there was the element where some of their best players may have been ineligible or got in trouble. But over the last 15 years, I've tweeted about this and I've told Woo, guys like that, I'm still a 7-5-7 guy, but if you look at the state now, Northern Virginia with the Stonebridge, the Westfields, they had beaten Oscar Smith now at that time 3 years in a row in the state championship. Richmond, you talk about Verina and Lauren Johnson, Highland Springs, and even in basketball with Bird and then Southwest Virginia. Listen, I went to school there. It was a joke. You had some nice teams, but even that region, Virginia as a state has always been a great state of talent. But would you agree that over the last decade or so, the state with high school talent from baseball, football, basketball, track, all the sports, the athletes, the level of competition has improved dramatically? Because it's not just, the 7-5-7, the 703, the 804. Now it's like, hey, this state as a whole is really good. What would you say to that?
I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes is part of it is you got to keep up with the Joneses. So they've seen the dominance, the sheer dominance in numbers from Tidewater for years in championships, specifically in basketball and football. Richmond's come along here lately. They had a run where they didn't get any. Northern Virginia had that run in basketball. They hadn't done it since T.C. Williams and Ivan Thomas's team. Ivan now coaches at Providence. Got it done against that Bethel squad that was rather vaunted there when John Tell Evans and them played. But I'd say part of it, too, is the realignment, Dwight, because you got to remember now, Class 6, if you look at those schools there, almost all of them are Northern Virginia except that Region A, which has got a mixture of Tidewater and Richmond. And this is the first time since realignment where none of those teams in boys or girls basketball are going on to the state playoffs at all. So we're talking about first time in 8-9 years, nobody at the highest classification is going on. I think the realignment did more benefit to Southwest Virginia and Northern Virginia because Northern Virginia, A, is growing at such an exponential rate right now, and B, Southwest Virginia, they're getting more teams at that championship level at the lower levels, Class 2, Class 1. You bring up Richmond, John Marshall's in 2 now. They were destroying it in Class 3 for basketball. Now they're just unbeatable, it feels like, in Class 2 with what Tidewater has got there. Yeah, it's so weird. They won a state championship one year in Class 3 when they beat Lansdowne, the Class 6, I think, champion or finalist, in our Virginia Preps Classic. And I'm like, they just beat the Class 6 team. They're going to win Class 3. Heck yeah, they just beat them in our thing at Oscar Smith that year. But and in football, I think in some respects, we go back to what's happened. There's been more coaching stability in those pockets of places than there has been, say, in the 7-5-7 or at some of those schools that'll get there and then lose the game because they'll have a coaching turnover or perhaps their best guy transferred out, that they've got a tradition in their program so that they're able to get back to that level. They just can't get over that championship level hump because they don't have that difference maker guy that perhaps their opponent has. So I think it's a mixed bag in that regard. However, to their credit, I think other parts of the state have been so hungry to get on that stage, and to those coaches and players, props to them because they've been at it, grinding away, hammering away to try to get to that point. And that mixture has kind of morphed at the right time for them to do so.
No, just a few more questions because we could probably go
Yeah,
another hour. Because
we could
when
probably
you
go 10
say
hours.
stuff, yeah. So you mentioned coaching, and I saw you share an article this past summer. And I've talked to a lot of guys you mentioned. Obviously, I have my platform, but I'm friends with and colleagues with a lot of these guys as well. Even you see it with referees now, and even high school coaches in other sports, softball, baseball, but especially in the two biggest ones, football and basketball, especially in the Tidewater area. It is tough to find high school coaches that will stay because of what I'm hearing is the entitlement of the kids, some of the parents that think it's just ADs. I've heard a variety of reasons. I don't know, but
Same here.
you have the distinct perspective. You cover it. This is your thing on all levels in many sports. What is the issue? What is going on? Because I'm an OG, so I'm from the Kozlowski. My guy that passed away at Norcom that coached football there.
Oh, Joe Langston,
Joe
legendary.
Langston, Coach
Yeah,
Mike Smith, Bill D.
yeah.
So even I played for Beamer, who coached the same staff. I was very, very blessed. So
Mhm.
turnover was not something. You saw programs that had turnover. You were like, oh yeah, where you ain't gonna win there anyway because they don't care. But now I see guys. I mean, Bud Foster's been on my show, and Bud Foster said, hey, I could keep coaching another years, but I need to step down. It's just different now. That's on the collegiate level with the transfer portal and all the stuff that goes with that. But on the high school level, I mean, you shared that article in the 7-5, man. This guy's just like, I'm good. I'm not doing this.
Yeah,
What is
we had just in the Beach District alone, I think it was like 6 of the 11 schools had coaching changes after the spring, and people got started wondering like, is there something wrong with that city? And I think now you have people that come into the profession and their goal isn't to do this for their life. When they started in probably in your era, that 80s, 90s, some of them said this is going to be a life occupation for me. And now the view of it is different. Or when they get into it thinking it's going to be a life occupation, they realize this isn't for me long term. So it's either one of those two sides of it. And speaking with some of these coaches, I part of it is the pandemic has not helped matters because now it's affected. You got to remember, they're not only coaches. In a lot of respects, these high school coaches are educators. They're teachers as well. So they have another job that requires an inordinate amount of their time and energy and effort. So that compounds matters even more when you have to follow all these different protocols and procedures to do what you do on a daily basis. I think that's impacted things. I've had this conversation with people, and I'd be curious, can you be one? Because you have a kid now and you interact with different parents and coaches and people. I don't think that kids are necessarily different. I think the way they grow up might be different. I think some parents are different now because they grew up differently than their parents. So I don't think that kids are necessarily different, but I think all the elements that kids grow up with and mature and matriculate, it's different. They didn't have social media when we came up. They didn't have these things they have now. So that the circumstances are different. The kids aren't necessarily different. And I don't know that necessarily the parents are different, but the parents have had a different upbringing and their way of life is different. So that makes them, in a sense, different.
Ray Lewis was on the show I do with Mike, the Big 757 show, talking all things tech. And Ray Lewis made a great point. The great Ray Lewis, he said that the kids now have more distractions more than ever.
Yes.
And I don't get online. I've been around so many young kids in my professional world. I'm a licensed therapist. I work with teens all over the DMV, DC, Northern Virginia, Maryland. I coach AAU basketball. I have a son and a teenage daughter and a younger daughter who's going to be a teen here in a second.
Ooh.
I
You got
don't
gray hair's coming, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They in here. But at the end of the day, I don't like, these youngins are soft or whatever. Yes, you can't do and say certain things that I experienced in the 90s. Like I saw some stuff. And stuff was said if it happens now, you're getting fired. There's a documentary. You're going to get canceled. But at the same time, I raised my children because my mom and dad are still alive, still married, the way I was raised. And I'm happy my son is not growing up in Eastern Newport News or on Shell Road where, I love that area. I still go back to those areas, but it was rough. I'm blessed to be in a situation where, we have a homeowners association and people are looking out for one another. But regardless of that, that doesn't make him soft. The same way I didn't agree when the Fab Five said Grant Hill was soft until they played him. They realized that he could ball too. But I do think having kids I deal with on a regular from an athletic perspective, I do think the coaches have it much. It's just a lot they deal with more than ever. Just hearing some of the stuff, and then like if I'm unhappy now with my son's playing time, my daughter's playing time on the coach, I can go to Facebook and Twitter and rant. I can just get on there and just
No
start
doubt.
ranting. And it's just it's different, man. I mean, I respect what these guys do, especially when you saw the episode when I had Lauren Johnson and Troy Mans on together,
Mhm.
and I'm close with those guys, and they told me how when they both took those jobs in the 804 at two prominent Richmond schools,
Mhm.
how for the first few years they dealt with people that didn't want them there, and there was
Oh yeah.
a push to get them out, and people were having secret meetings. I'm like, that's crazy.
Listen,
So
there are coaches that have won 400, 500 games, multiple state championships that I get all the time, either from them or through sources close to them, that they want them out of their job. And I'll tell you what, it's given me another perspective too, Dwight, is now being, you get this on probably the regular, but covering it and dealing with these teams at the high school level, it gives you one view of it. And then you know more than what you can say or report. That the common fan who gets on the message boards and goes to the rails or goes to Twitter and Facebook and goes off the rails, they don't see. But being with the OD women's basketball team, the psychological and mental work that goes into just the physical coaching part, that requires a lot of time and energy. So I think I get a different perspective of being around them and what they do and doing with their team, which right now is knocking on the door for possibly we shall see an NCAA tournament bid, and we'll see if they can win the conference tournament and go dancing this year. But and when you're new to a program, that requires so much. You don't just walk in the door, here's the keys, here's the clipboard, away you go on your way to the playoffs. It's not that simple. And nowadays it's definitely it's a lot more taxing, because you mentioned the word distractions. There are so many more distractions for our kids, for our coaches, for our parents, but everybody.
no doubt, Matt. Um, I want to end it. We have our guests. We end the show because I know I have to be conscious of time because there's so many things. I mean, I could get into the debates and different topics that I know guests want to hear about, but this won't be our last time talking. We might have to do a part two, the first ever part
Absolutely.
two. But
That's
I
fine.
do want to ask you this, man. I want to wrap it up. I allow my guests to give their final thoughts. You being a columnist, a journalist, a play-by-play guy, you wear many hats. We mentioned David Till
Mhm.
on here earlier, and how he is a Hall of Fame. We call him the GOAT. Everybody in our profession, or for me, I'm you know a contributor. We all recognize him as the guy, and there's a lot of guys like him. When you talk about who you are and the fact that you're leaving a legacy, like people check for your work, the fact that we listen to you, that we wanted, your name comes up and it's like, oh, Matt's going to be there. Like you have become and established yourself as one of those guys. I know you're humble, but people do love your work and they respect it. Um, Talking to the other young and upcoming Matt Hatfields in the 7.5 and the 804 in Virginia or in DC, Maryland that are going to see this. Kids that are playing that say, okay, when I'm done, I want to kind of do this. I want to have a
Mhm.
podcast. I want to get on radio because there are a lot of kids that want to do it. I love this work, but it's not my main thing. But what advice do you have for them, man, to just stay on the grind? Because you and I both know you paid your dues. See, people see you now, they don't know about the stuff you did you weren't paid for, or the
Right.
check didn't come through, or you had to catch a ride and you didn't eat till 7 o'clock. They don't know about that. And we didn't touch into all that because you and I can go for hours. But just to wrap it up and tell them, how do you stay on your grind and how do you get to where you can be, if not just as good as Matt Hatfield, but better? How do you
So
get to that point?
you've heard those stories, huh?
Oh yeah. Well, because I have friends like you, like my guy Cal Bailey, and Danny knows Cal
Mhm.
Bailey. He works with the Carolina Panthers and the Charlotte what are they? The Hornets now.
Hornets now, yeah.
Um, he got me into broadcasting the radio, and he, you realize when I wrote for Rivals, I wrote for VT Scoop and
Uh-huh.
247, and before that Rivals, and I thought I was going to be making like bank, and I'm like, oh, but I love what I was doing,
Right.
and people don't realize what you go through just to get in the position. I remember I did the ESPN 2013 spring game for Virginia Tech, and
Mhm.
I did it, and I had a great time. First time doing the whole color analyst piece or whatever. And I remember they told me, he said, man, a lot of guys wanted to do this. And I was like, what? They were like, yeah, there were some people that were upset. You got it. They're happy for you. But there was 25 people that put in for it. And I
Yeah.
was like, what? I'm thinking I'm just going to go up here. So I started to realize, like, pregame shows I was hosting and things I was doing, there were people that they went to school and they really wanted to do it.
Right.
And so I understand and respect your grind. I've talked to David Teal. I talked to other people, Aaron McFarland, and I know about the grind in radio and media and TV. So with that being said, you have a Hall of Fame perspective. You are in the midst. You are a future GOAT.
Well, it's kind of you. I don't know about all that. But here's what advice I would say. It's the same thing you probably got told as a player. It's not about the name on the back of the jersey. It's about the name on the front that says it's the team name. So always remember, whoever you are contributing for or working for, it's about them. But more importantly than that, always remember it's not about you, because we're all in this profession and all replaceable. You can be replaced at the drop of a hat, a minute. One of the things you brought up, Bruce Rader, I saw a quote he gave, he just retired from Wavy after 45 years, that he was always fearful of being fired. I don't know that you have to always be fearful, but you got to stay driven and motivated to continue working. Don't rest on your laurels. It's not about you. Remember, it's always about the subjects that you cover. Don't make it about you when you're doing a story or a game. It's about the players, the teams, what you're covering. So that's the biggest piece of advice I give to a youngster out there, is because, you're always, when you're coming up through the pike, I think it's just natural. We all have egos. We all have, we want to get the attention and love, but it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, look at this, look at me. And we're in a social media age where we're all doing this stuff. It's about what you're covered, and make sure that you pour your amount of energy, sweat equity, everything you have into what you're covering. Go about it with as much passion, work, and enthusiasm and energy as you can for that. Because if you do that and you stay on the grind that way and you continue to chop away, good things will come. And I know it's easy to get frustrated and get out of it, but if you're in it for the long haul, eventually you'll reap the rewards.
Awesome stuff, man. Real quick before I do my sign off, how can people check for you? You got a lot of stuff going on. Just remind everybody watching this, how can they keep up with you on Twitter? What other stuff you got coming up? What are you doing?
Sure. VirginiaPreps.com. I'm the publisher for that site. You can always check out our stuff there. I'm on Twitter at Hatfield Sports. Give me a follow. You can always send me a message. I'll try to reply if I'm not, stranded somewhere, but I'm available at my devices. You can follow. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I do some stuff, obviously, for ESPN Radio 94.1 Saturday mornings. Coach Young and me, 10 a.m. to noon. We got a podcast page up there. I've been like you. I've been a frequent contributor for a lot of different outfits and platforms, from the ACC Sports Journal to Cavs Corner now, the UVA rival site from time to time when I have time. SuffolkNewsHerald.com. I do some stuff for them. And I've done some TV stuff here and there, done some broadcasting, field hockey. I tell you what, field hockey prepared me, I told those people, more than anything for the women's basketball gig, because you have to fill a lot of time for that. And I'm still learning that sport. So constantly growing and evolving, but enjoying every minute of it, because, I think the pandemic taught us a lot of things, Dwight, that we take certain things in our lives for granted. And you definitely appreciate when things aren't there, when you couldn't go to games, when you couldn't have fans, and the things that you cherish, they're much more meaningful now than they were. So you try to find the positives out of a bad situation, which was where we lost so many lives and still are losing lives to that with the coronavirus. And hopefully we're getting near the end of that from that dreaded and terrible start that we had with it. So I'm just still plugging away at it. And I appreciate so much of what you do, and you giving so many of the legends around the Commonwealth and beyond an opportunity to get spotlighted through your work, because it's been a fascinating watch. I told you this, and I mean this sincerely. I've spent more time probably than I should when I could be getting more things done than I need to get done watching, because I'll get captivated by hearing some of the stories of the players or coaches or even sports writers, contributors you've had on your Vicktory Life series. So continue to do what you do, and all the best to you and your family. And looking forward to seeing what's in store for your youngster and Isaiah and his Patriot Pioneers the rest of the way here on this journey to maybe a state championship, perhaps a collision course with unbeaten Hatfield. How about that? That could be a heck of a game, and I'm going to miss it because I'll be in Frisco, Texas. I'm going to have to be watching on the NFHS, so you'll have to give Andy Hayes and my guy Ed Young and Demetrius Means some good filler from all the Pioneers fans out there and all the Hayfield Hawks fans if we get that matchup, which people are keeping their fingers crossed we get in a Class 6. How about that? 2 undefeated teams, that would be something else.
Oh man, something, man. Being a father is so much more anxious and anxiety than I did as a player. I was calm and collected, man. I am all in, man. And I love watching my son play, and it's been an amazing ride. I love what I could go on and on about Sherman Rivers, man. That man means so much to my son and so many players. And even Hayfield, I watched them play. Respect to Hayfield. Great team, great players. I mean, yeah, that would be great for Virginia, and that would be great for high school basketball, man. And it's crazy. I took Isaiah, man, to a lot of state championships at VCU as a kid, and I said, one day this could be you, and he would smile. He said, it is going to be me. So we'll see. But again, man, thank you, Matt, man, for everything you do for our sports, not just basketball, football, but all the sports. All the kids appreciate you. I know the parents, the consumers, the observers, man, they keep up the great work. And like I say, every episode, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, make sure you have a positive impact. You live a great legacy, man. Vicktory Life. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and IG, Instagram for more great videos like this. Please subscribe to our channel. Thank you again, Matt Hatfield, man. This was wonderful. I appreciate you, boss.
Always a pleasure, my friend. We'll do it again.